Freudian slip, who among us has not heard this phrase? Very systematically, the opinion is being imposed in the information space that in psychology there is no more significant figure than Sigmund, our everything, Freud. Just listen to these praises. Freud's contribution to the scientific knowledge of the world is comparable in scale to the contribution of Copernicus and Darwin. For all the shortcomings and inaccuracies of his theory, Freud, in fact, realized that the human psyche has a certain operating system that we do not yet fully understand, but which we can study, and therefore make changes. It's as if representatives of wild tribes were given tablets, and they simply poked at them, and then a person appeared who guessed to go to the settings menu. But are all these laudatory texts so close to reality? What is Sigmund Freud really remembered by the scientific community? Was there anything he lied about on purpose? Let's figure it out. One day in 1973, a group of researchers set out to write a book in support of Freud. As a result, the canonical volume Experimental Freudian Theory Psychology Reveals was born, in which the authors honestly admitted, there is no evidence. Let's start with the fact that Freud himself started the canard that Freud invented the unconscious, and there are no questions about his PR talents. After all, he was definitely not a stupid person. As a child, Sigmund had exceptional academic abilities and had a passion for learning new things. At the age of 9, he passed the exams and entered the gymnasium a year ahead of schedule. Already in his youth, Freud spoke fluent French, English, Spanish and Italian, and also studied Greek and Latin. After graduating with honors from the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Vienna, young Freud began with surgery, but after a few months he abandoned this field of medicine, considering such activity too tedious. After working for some time with the famous psychiatrist Jean Charcot and then with his friend Joseph Breuer, who used hypnosis in their medical practice to eliminate hysterical symptoms, Freud decided to abandon the use of hypnosis in sessions and developed the method of free association, during which the patient was asked to speak freely about everything that comes to mind. The use of the method of free association provided the impetus for the development of psychoanalysis. But there was nothing Freudian in the main idea of the unconscious. The fact that consciousness is not the captain of the brain was said long before him, back in ancient Rome. The philosopher Plotinus and the physician Galen noticed that we do breathing or ordinary actions like walking unconsciously. Hippocrates, observing epilepsy, where the body is completely out of human control, realized, we have an extra-conscious control system. In the 11th century, the Arab scientist Alhazen was ahead of his time by a good 9 centuries and invented the word itself, which Freud would then hijack. He suggested that there are visual illusions that we perceive unconsciously. Today, such illusions are used not only to entertain children, but also for laboratory tests, by showing words, pictures, and numbers hidden behind the speed and technique of display. Scientists determine where the border between conscious and unconscious perception lies. For example, how our brain, without visually recording information, manages to think about it and take it into account in the future. For example, without the participation of consciousness, we can react emotionally to hidden words or add/subtract numbers. Yes. The same one that set teeth on edge, 25th frame. Alhazen also anticipated the most spectacular conclusions of laboratory tests. We can make decisions unconsciously. We have also been thinking about hidden motives and desires, Freud's signature gimmicks, for a long time. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz wrote in various forms. Our actions are controlled by millions of secret mechanisms that cannot be detected by ordinary reflection. As is the case with perception, it is influenced by our expectations and ideas. The blind spot and capillaries on the retina are masked. As in Photoshop, the brain completes the picture as it pleases, but you and I have no idea. Well, already in the 19th century it was already impossible to find a psychologist or psychiatrist who would not recognize the unconscious activity of the brain not only as actually existing, but also as of paramount importance. French psychologists, for example, literally shouted that we do a lot of things automatically. Theodule Ribot noted how we use working memory, Gabriel Tard, how we unconsciously imitate, Pierre Janet, how we are guided by goals and motives that arose in distant childhood and now define our personality. It was Janet who most of all subsequently accused Freud of copy-pasting ideas. Stanislas Dean, a luminary of cognitive science and one of the greatest modern researchers of consciousness, writes about Freud this way: it would not be an exaggeration to say that of all the ideas expressed in his work, the most convincing were not his, and his own were among the unconvincing. Now about the lies of Freud's therapist. In the 1910s, Sigmund Freud published the book From the History of a Childhood Neurosis. In it, he describes the curious case of the Wolf Man, a Russian aristocrat who suffered from depression. After a series of sessions on the couch of a genius psychoanalyst, the Wolf Man is miraculously cured, and half a century later history delivers its verdict: it's just a story. Many years later, journalist Karen Oberholzer chatted with the legendary Wolfman Sergei Pankayev and found out that he was never cured. I am in the same state in which I came to Freud. Key cases for Freudian theory: Little Hans, Herbert Graf, Anna O., Bertha Pappenheim, Dora, Ida Bauer, and other patients are also far-fetched or falsified. Frank Salloway, a historian of science at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, sums it up this way: each of Freud's published cases plays a role in the psychoanalytic legend, but the more detail you learn about each case, the stronger the image of Freud twisting the facts to suit his theory becomes. It turns out that psychoanalysis, in fact, was built on a dozen clinical cases that culminated in brilliant therapy and healing. But the problem is that there was no healing. Why? Let's understand the method. According to Freud, early memories sit deep, deep within us, and the psyche distorts them all the time. This is always traumatic, and random episodes of childhood spoil our whole life, turning into monsters and fantasies that bear no resemblance to the original. Hence the task of the psychoanalyst is to overcome the monsters, that is, to figure out how memories were refracted, and to declassify phantasms, that is, to return to the authentic version of the event. Freud was partly right about serious traumas such as child rape or witnessing disasters and deaths. In the event of a cruel and emotionally intense event, its imprint is not recorded in the hippocampus, which controls memory, but is processed immediately in the cerebellar amygdala, an ancient structure responsible for facial recognition, the emergence of animal fear and other basic things. As a result, the defense mechanisms of the psyche package such memories as a foreign body and exclude them from associative networks. Such memories are stored in their original form, and on the therapist's couch they can indeed be retrieved in this form. Whether it is necessary is another matter. This can be compared to the fact that a bullet that enters the body, contrary to Hollywood myths and popular belief, is not always removed from the body. Because an attempt by surgeons to remove a bullet can sometimes cause more damage than what is already there, and then the bullet remains in the body, which encapsulates, that is, covers the foreign body with a protective shell so that there is no impact on the body. Same with memories. Scientists from Cambridge have found that the process of suppression goes far beyond the conscious level, and even in the very basements of the unconscious, where we send traumas, there are still levels from where memories can no longer influence our behavior in a Freudian way. In other words, defense mechanisms actually protect. It is not surprising that Freud was so often criticized for his cruel and sadistic approach. After all, he worked with memory like a butcher, not taking into account that it is designed in a sophisticated way, and the processes of storing and accessing what is stored vary greatly from case to case. According to recent research, memory is not a linear composition, but rather a continuum where the past meshes with the present in a dance of mutual influence. When we retrieve something from memory, we always reconstruct the experience, adding feelings, prejudices and knowledge gained much later. Memories are basically structured like a structure with empty pockets that are filled with whatever excites our brain in the present. Moreover, when we remember, we literally rewrite data at the neural level. At the moment of visualizing an event from the past, we activate not a specific storage of memory, there is none, but zones that were active at a specific point in time. That is why it is so easy for us to think up, invent or remember something that did not happen, as in the classic experiments of psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, where subjects, after small machinations by researchers, remembered how they saw Bugs Bunny in Disneyland as a child, although this did not happen to them, because Bugs Bunny is the property of Warner Brothers. In principle, he does not exist in the Walter Disney universe. After all this information, a logical question arises: why, then, in our enlightened and civilized world is it still possible to make an appointment with a psychoanalyst? One of the reasons is described in Todd Dufresne's book Killing Freud, 20th Century Culture and the Death of Psychoanalysis. So much work has been published, so many reputations have been built, so much money has been spent every day on the right to lie on the couch of the leading Freudian. In general, it is not so easy to give up on this. But there is another reason why Freud is so tenacious. It's simple: Freud created not so much a psychiatric theory as an alternative mythology based on the patterns of a religious cult. And this, as you know, is a powerful thing that operates on top of logic, rationality, and common sense. All three signs of religion are here: firstly, a dogmatic theory, sent down to the Messiah Freud from the dark depths of human nature; secondly, ritual practices, meetings with appropriate attributes such as lying on a couch; thirdly, the isolated life of a religious group, the tendency of all fans of psychoanalysis to interpret any manifestation of being and behavior through their own beliefs in anal, genital and other conditioning. For example, the interpretation of dreams, which Freud considered his most significant work, was virtually ignored by the scientific community and was a commercial failure. In subsequent editions to the first edition, dream theories were generally subjected to harsh criticism by psychoanalysts of the new generation. But despite the negative reaction of scientists, the interpretation of dreams helped Freud do the main thing: to form around himself a group of like-minded people who became interested in his theories. So maybe the main thing is that Freud was a genius, approximately like Ostap Bender? And the children of Lieutenant Schmidt with diplomas as psychoanalysts still successfully work as highly paid tour guides to the land of fools for seekers of psychiatric exoticism? It will be interesting to see in the comments what you think about this. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching and see you in future episodes on our channel.